right, so we'll start at Lawson. Lawson Volcanic National Park. Probably one of the least visited parks. It's on the way to nowhere. If you've anybody been there? Not a lot of hands go up on that one. Route 5 is the Central Valley. This is to the northeast of the Central Valley, so it's a destination trip. It's not really on the way anywhere. You get in there, and the Lawson Peak is down here in the western part of the park. Not a lot of roads. It's a good hiking park. A lot of volcanic activity. This is a 10,000-foot volcano. The ring of fire that rims the Pacific, that it starts over New Zealand and Mount Pinatubo and in the Philippines and Fuji and up to the Aleutian Islands and comes down. The Cascades have 18 on the eastern rim of the Pacific rim, ring of fire. This is the southernmost of the 10,000 footers. 1915 wasn't that long ago. If you're ever on a quiz show and the question is, what was the last volcanic eruption in a national park? The answer is Lassen. Mount St. Helens just went up in 1980, but that's a national monument. So if it's a nitpicking question, this was the last one to erupt in a national park. Nice new visitor center, very low key, built into the side, not ostentatious in any means. I don't know his first name, Mr. Bumpus. Mr. Bumpus was an unfortunate soul. He was one of the early guys here. This area, the thermal area in Lassen, is not unlike Yellowstone in that there's mud pots and fumaroles and all kinds of stuff. The problem when you're the first one there is that there's no boardwalk in place. Well, let's call him Joe. Joe Bumpus twice, not once, but twice, discovered a very thin crusted area, and his legs plunged through into scalding boiling water, and that's why he calls it Bumpus Hell rather than paradise. It is a national park. You're free to go wherever you want. My very strong advice would be stay to the boardwalk. You just can't tell how thick or how thin the crust is around these thermal areas. There's literally bubbling water just below the surface. Lots of geysers, mud pots. You want to wear a layer of old clothing. You can get up close and personal with if you want to, but you're going to come away reeking of sulfur. It's very, very strong smell, but that goes with the territory. It's not the entire park that's like that. That's just one section of it. There are gorgeous lakes and forested areas and stuff. Lodging wise, if you're not bringing a tent, if you're in a sleeping bag, there's one lodge. This was in existence prior to the designation of national park status, so it's grandfathered in. They get to keep it. They've done a nice job. It's rustic. Rooms are nice. It's the only single place in the park to get anything to eat. So if you're staying for more than a day, you'll see your fellow travelers at mealtime because it's the only place to get anything to eat. It's up in the north. It's in the eastern section. So if you hike from there up into the northeast corner, one of the must-see parks trails is the Cinder Cone. Rather desolate because what you're hiking on is pumice from an eruption. Water doesn't sit well in pumice, in lava. It just drains through. So there's not a lot of vegetation that can root there because it doesn't hold the water well. There's Lassen in the background there that you can see. Those dunes in the middle look like some artistic outdoors person, but actually it's mom nature did that. God knows how or what caused them, but it's pretty interesting. They call them the painted dunes, and they border between the Cinder Cone and what used to be a lake, Snag Lake, I don't know who called them the fantastic lava beds. It certainly wasn't the fish that used to reside in the lake. There's only a sliver of the lake that you can see that's left. The rest all got filled in with lava when it flowed down. The cone itself, pretty good size, it's 1,000 feet across. There is a trail that goes down into it if you want to. The unique thing about this area is that Lassen is the only single place anywhere on the face of the earth where you can find, if you're geology major, there are 4 types of volcanoes. Nowhere else in the world can you find all 4 types in one place. The Cinder Cone that we're looked at, one crack, one vent that the magma comes up and it repeatedly spews out and it over time builds up a cone. The composite, very violent, throwing stuff way up into the air, Mount Rainier or Fuji over in Japan. Those are composite volcanoes. Shield doesn't blow up. It's more like leaking. Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea, Kilauea, constant low viscosity flow, or Lassen itself is a lava dome that was very viscous lava, doesn't flow very fast at all. So there's 4 types of volcanoes within the borders of the park. You can find examples of all 4 of them. So if that's your thing, this is where you should go. Go climb a volcano is the t-shirt du jour of in the mid 80s of Lassen. I was living in California, met my wife, grew up in Barnstable. I grew up outside of Boston. We met on a beach in Marin County. So all of our relatives are here. We're going to move back east. Neither one of us had been through the Northwest before. So on our way back, we took a 7-week van trip going north from San Francisco. You spend 7 weeks in a van with somebody, you get to know them. So that was our get to know you time. So I had asked, do you like to hike? And oh yes, I love to hike. She lived in Concord, Mass, and her terminology for hiking was a walk around Walden Pond. This is a 2,000 foot elevation gain, starting at 8,000, going up to over 10,000 feet, 2.5 miles, and it's not a real fun hike. That's what you're looking. If you're a Tolkien fan, this is basically the route to Mordor, is what you're hiking on. It's just you're going up the lava flow to get up to the top. It's not real fun. You're above tree line. There's no shade. We were there. Well, the snow hadn't gone, but it was pretty hot. Dry, more dry than hot. But she was a trooper. She plodded along. That's Duffy, my wife. And after this, I did teach her how to focus. But that's essentially, if you stop on the side of the trail for a rest, that's what you're hiking up. Get up to the ridge line. Now, I was all excited to get up to the top because I knew what I had planned. This is the day that we had, by the way. You'll see more pictures from this trip. For the places we were going through, it was a rough summer. 1985 was a horrible drought. For trip planning, we didn't have to delay a single day's worth of planning because there were no rain days. It never rained, but it was pretty dry. But we had clear days like this all through the place. Right in the middle is, I ran back down, gave her the camera and said, I'm going to go up onto the top of the rocks and wave, get my picture and stuff. So I'm up there. She's coming along, got to the top and decided, okay, I'm here. Let's get out of here. She wasn't having a good time. And I was stalling and I wanted to stay a little, well, let's wait a little bit longer. There's no one else. This is pre-selfie stick era. I chose the place to propose to her and I wanted to get a picture of it, but there's no one else up there. So I'm dragging my feet and finally Ranger Rick, like 20 minutes later, Ranger Rick comes up. I said, get a picture. That's Mount Shasta over in the background on the right. And she said, yes. So that is the first and only time that she's ever seen the top of a 10,000-foot mountain, I might add. But it was a good one, very memorable. So that's what Lawson Park means to us. Sunset, the afternoon clouds come in. You can get some pretty pictures. So that's why it's called Lawson Volcanic National Park. All right, now if we go over to the coast, this is a 1985 picture with a little more facial hair than I have at present. Very unique picture. You will never, ever see it again. And I'll tell you why later. Go up north from, easier to get to, 101 is the coastline. The top above Eureka, there's 37 miles of Pacific coastline that make up the Redwood State Park. Timeline-wise, early 1800s, Jedediah Smith didn't discover anything. The indigenous folks that lived there brought him to the area. I don't know what the zoning is in Osterville, quarter acre, half acre. How about 2 million acres of old growth redwood forest? 2 million acres of it. That's an eye opener. Problem was, 25 years later, California gold rush. They discovered gold in the Mvar Hills. Well, within 3 years, the town of Eureka had 9 full-time operating around-the-clock sawmills going. They had to build places, build towns, support the prospectors and stuff. It was a boom area. Down go the redwoods. Now, they didn't have chainsaws. Husqvarna had not come into being yet. That's how you cut down a redwood in the early 1800s. It was an event. Now, none of these, number one, I didn't take these pictures. Number two, none of them are photoshopped. These are old pictures. You know, by using today's technology, you could take a picture of a downed redwood and Photoshop people in standing on a log. That's the size of a redwood log. Those aren't Lilliputians, they're normal size individuals. But you had to get the piggies to market. You had to get the logs to the mill. It takes an 8-horse drawn carriage chain to move one piece of wood. They would drag them to the railroad car, the siding that had been made, about one piece of wood per railroad car. That's how you get a redwood log over to where it gets. Now the lumber mills that cut down, the lumberers that cut down the sequoias were morons, because the sequoias, even though they yield more board foot, it's horrible wood for building. It's splinters, it's soft wood. Redwood, however, is very different. It's almost as hard as oak or maple. It's excellent wood for making furniture and magnificent grain, beautiful red wood. The coloration is gorgeous. So they went to town. 1920, they finally got some stirrings of save the redwoods. It wasn't until 1968, with over 90% of all the old growth redwoods completely clear cut and wiped out, they finally stepped in and dedicated, 58,000 acres is nothing to sneeze at. It's a pretty good slug of a portion of land. But remember, we started with over 2 million acres. That's all that's left is 58,000 acres. So this is an interesting picture. This is President Johnson with his wife Ladybug in the middle, and Dick Nixon and Trish over on the right. It takes an act of Congress to create a national park. They wanted to conserve it, so the Department of the Interior Secretary came to President Johnson and said, we would like you to sign off on a new national park. So President Johnson said, all right, my wife would like a grove dedicated in her honor. And the Secretary of Interior kind of looked down at his feet and shuffled around, and President Johnson said, "Is there a problem?" He said, "Well, actually there is. There's a standing regulation for the National Park Service that no memorial or monument can be named for a living individual. You can do it in memoriam once they pass, but you can't have one for a living person." Well, President Johnson is from Texas, and he's used to getting his way. So he stared at the secretary and said, "Do you or do you not want a national park?" So here we are at the dedication of the Ladybug Johnson Grove, which is a gorgeous place to look. So what you ended up with on the right is the southern park. It's a 37-mile section of patchwork conservation lands. The state of California had 3 sections, Jedediah Smith, Redwood State Park, Del Norte, and Prairie Creek, and it was intermingled with the federal parcels. So they said, okay, so now you've got 132,000 acres, but you don't need them to be jointly or managed separately. Since 1994, this is the only national park that is not exclusively administered to by the Park Service. It's a combination of state and federal lands. This is the new part. When the last 1985 entrance sign that I showed you said Redwood National Park, that's gone. This is the new replacement sign. That's my son Brooks. So a walk in this park is interesting because pretty much anywhere you go, you're going to have the same view. The canopy at the top closes off sunlight, so there's not a lot of light that filters down. You have ferns that like the forest, contrasting delicate ferns with 300-foot. You can come up front, I won't bite. The lowest branches on a redwood are 100 feet from the ground. And then they go up from there to 300 feet. There's not even 100-foot trees in New England. So it's not like you can point to anything around here and say, yeah, it's like that. It isn't. It's, if you want to see 300-foot trees, you go here. But you don't have to fight your way through the underbrush to hike around in there. It's just ferns. It's just all open. No shortage of getting creative with photography. You'll hear me say this about several parks. You can't take a bad picture. Pretty much anything you take is wow. You will, however, be in need of a chiropractor after an afternoon hiking in the redwoods, because all day long, all you're doing is staring straight. It's very difficult to capture in a still shot. You need a video to scan up and show the full majesty of it. To give you an idea of how big is 380 feet, Hyperion is the tallest redwood. It's bigger than most of the monuments that are man-made. So that's your view as you walk around, craning your neck. Redwoods will grow elsewhere, but not in this sort of magnificence. There are two reasons. Number one is the climate. The Gulf Stream along the Atlantic coast keeps Reykjavik from freezing in the middle of the winter. There's a similar Pacific Stream that goes up along the California coast. Doesn't freeze. It's 50 to 60 degrees minimum year round. And the jet stream coming across the Pacific dumps 60 to double that inches a year. So it doesn't freeze. And what's more important is, if you've ever been to San Francisco, every afternoon, you lose the Golden Gate Bridge. The Central Valley acts as a heat pump. Warm air rises, Central Valley heats up, warm air goes up. It draws in the colder air off of the Pacific, and in with it comes the fog. Same thing happens here. The fog comes in very reliably, every single afternoon. the way that a tree feeds, nourishes its leaves and needles up at the top is capillary action. They draw in through the roots, the nourishment, and then it goes up the tree. Well, that can only take it so far. If you're growing 300 feet up, capillary action isn't strong enough to do that. So the only way you can get trees that big is with the daily bathing of the fog coming in, providing the moisture that the tree needs to nourish the top of it. And there are not a lot of places that can reliably count on a fog bath every afternoon. That's what's unique about this area that allows the trees to grow. Avenue of the Giants is a section of 101, Highway 101. It's very cool. You can turn off, there's a bunch of turnoffs. Pretty much pick a trail, and anywhere you go, this is what you're walking up through. Very, very memorable hikes. The Redwoods are subject to, they make great either furniture or artwork and stuff. So unfortunately, if you have a burl, the grain that is so beautiful in there is inducement for people to come and poach. This guy actually got caught that took his chainsaw to a burl on the side here. Not stuff that you want to do. Humboldt University is up in Northern California. There's a whole curriculum. You can get a degree studying redwoods. You get harnesses and ropes and you go up into the canopies of redwoods and find out what makes them tick. You'll see this in a lot of the old growth parks that attract a lot of foot traffic. They don't want people stomping on the same ground. It compacts the dirt and inhibits the roots from growing healthy. So they've got boardwalks so that you can go up and see this. This is the national champion redwood tree. We'll get to the measurements of a national champion later on. But that's what the boardwalks are for, so that you're not crunching, turning the dirt into concrete. Not all of the park is redwoods. There are Pacific Rim sections of it, coastal sections. The gold bluffs here have nothing to do with the gold that was found, the mineral gold. It's just the coloration of the bluffs. But there's campgrounds here. You can stay overnight and have a very different view than inland. Fern Canyon. Normally, if you're looking at ferns, they're down around your ankles. This is a whole canyon. They're 40, 50, 60-foot walls, all covered with ferns as you basically walk up the stream bed. It's a pretty unique experience. And again, any picture you take, you can get very foofy, artistic if you want to lie on your back and get the fern and the redwoods and stuff. There's no shortage of photo ops. That's about as much of a sunset shot as you're going to get in the redwoods. All right, so now we'll go up over the line into Oregon, Crater Lake. Crater Lake, Lassen is the southernmost of the volcanoes in the Cascade Range. We saw Shasta in the background from the summit of Lassen. Crater Lake is the next one up, just over going north over the Oregon line. It's a pretty good size. It's a 6-mile crater. It's actually a caldera. It's not a crater. And there's a rim drive, 33-mile drive around there. Only if you go later. We were there the middle of June. There were 18 feet of snow yet to be moved from the rim drive. So circumnavigating it was not an option. And that was the middle of June. So if you're going to go and plan on going around, July and August or better. The Pacific Crest Trail, the western version of the Appalachian that runs from the Canadian border down to Mexico, runs through the Cascades before it connects up with the Sierra Nevadas, bisects the park, goes right over what used to be Mount Mazama. Over on the east there, Mount Scott, my favorite hike. It's a 2.5-mile hike to get up to the top of it. at almost 9,000 feet, but it gives you this view looking back over the lake from a distance. Mount Mazama used to be a 12,000 foot volcano until it blew it erupted. It did not blow its top. It's now 8,000 feet. But what happened was there was basically a magma chamber, like a hot air balloon underneath that contained a couple million square whatevers of magma. Nature abhors a vacuum. When the magma erupted in a magnificent display, the chamber underneath was voided. The top 4,000 feet of the mountain then had no support, and it collapsed down into itself. So the floor of Crater Lake is what used to be the top. It went down into itself. So it didn't shatter and blow up the whole top of the mountain. It just sunk to fill the void where all the magma came from. So there's the picture of the chamber underneath it and all the lava spewing out. A lot of it flowed to the north. The north end of the park is not where you want to spend your time. It's rather desolate. It's hundreds of feet deep of pumice and scoria, which looks like this. And like I said, it doesn't hold moisture, so nothing grows there. Go to the southeast section. These used to be vents that were coming up, and the ash got welded into place, fused into these spires, and the soil around them has eroded, but they're like monuments to the passage of they got fused into these 60-foot columns that you don't see normally, so it's a fun trail to go out to. There is a little activity. So the lake averages around 1,500 feet deep. The East Basin is actually over 2,000 feet deep. It's the deepest lake anywhere in North America. Wizard Island over on the west section there rises about 750 feet above the surface of the lake, and the lake is 1,500 feet deep. So it's a cone where the mountain was trying to rebuild itself. The volcano was. It came up a couple thousand feet. So you've got Wizard Island there. Absolutely magnificent. The coloration is what's breathtaking about looking at the lake. There are no rivers or anything filling the crater. It's all precipitation or melted snow. So there's the water level's roughly around 2,000 feet down from the rim, and there's one trail, Cleetwood Cove, that will get you down to water level. Switchbacks, you go back and forth. Like I say, they average 43 feet of snow a year. So even in June, you've still got 15, 20 feet left. The clarity of this water, because there's no stream filling it, normally a stream might have suspended sediments, and which makes it, if not murky and muddy, at least visually impaired to look through. That's not the case here. This is, you measure the clarity of water with what's called a Secchi disc. It's roughly the size of a Frisbee, a little bigger than a Frisbee, and it's black and white. You lower that disc on a line as low as you can go into the water until you can't see it anymore. And that's the measure of the clarity of that water. Lake Tahoe is known for its clear water. That's in Northern California, up in the Sierra Nevadas. You can lower that disc this big, 70 feet down in Lake Tahoe, and still see it. That's how clear the water is there. Crater Lake, how about double that? 143 feet, you can lower the disc and still see it. It's like liquid glass. The water is so crystal clear, it's unbelievable. So what you're looking at is a perfect reflection of, if you see it on a cloudless blue day, that's what gives you the color of the water. And it's just so strikingly different from the waters of any other lake that you'll have seen. And it's because of the depth and the clarity of the water. I took this picture down where we hiked down to the water level. The yellow and dots there are just pine pollen that had blown down to this edge. But look at the day, the day we had to be there. There was not a cloud to be seen in the sky. And so the perfect reflection in the lake was, it's a color of blue that just etches itself into your mind's eye. You'll never forget that. Yes, did you have a question?
Does it freeze over during the wintertime?
Yes. Yeah, there's no, well, it does. I don't know, I've never been there in January. The question is, does it freeze during the winter? I would say yes, because there are currents, because of, there are some thermals underneath that just, it's not bubbling water, but it keeps it moving around. I'll show you how you prove that in a minute. There's no stream filled, so 1915, the railroad had a track close to there. They built a magnificent lodge up on the corner, right on the rim of the crater, but they needed something for people to do. So they used to stock up to World War II, they used to put trout and salmon in there just to give people something to do and fish in the area. This guy, the old man of the lake, is how you know that the water's moving. This is a very unique phenomenon. The thing's about 30, it's a hemlock stump that's about 30 feet long. The bottom part of it still has the root system connected to it. It remains dead vertical all day, every day. They have tales of the indigenous Indians from 450 years ago mentioning it. It's about 48 inches, about 4 feet above the surface. The rest of it stays, but it's always vertical and it moves around. It'll travel 2 to 3 miles in the crater each day. It's somewhere in the crater and it never goes away. It never rots. There's no microbes rotting the biomaterial. It just stays there. It's kind of fun to have a sighting of the old man of the lake. So you can go out onto the lake. There is a boat ride. If you hike down to Fleetwood, that you can get a ride out. There's 2 points. I mentioned Wizard Island there in the background on the left. That's 750 feet above the surface. And then the Phantom Ship on the right is another volcanic structure that grew high enough to pierce the surface. You can swim if you want to. I'll remind you that this is melted snow water. It's very, very cold. So there's our magnificent Crater Lake Lodge. How's that for location, location, location? Very, very popular, beautiful. They just don't make lodges like this anymore. Actually refurbished this early 1990s, I think. So there's your afternoon cocktail viewing area out on the porch. You could sit and watch sunset, which there are great vantage points for either down on the rim, or if you go back up to Mount Scott, you can get a nice sunset picture as well. So that's what's waiting for you out at Crater Lake. There's Brooks again. Now we get to Olympic. Olympic is one of the 3 parks. People in Seattle are spoiled. They have, you can go drive 80 miles to the southeast and Rainier is there. You drive around Puget Sound and you get to Olympic, and then it's 118 miles up to North Cascades. So that's a couple hours north, but they have 3 national parks ringing Seattle. Last ice age, on their way retreating back up into Canada, the 4,000 foot thick glaciers gouged out Puget Sound, as well as the Juan de Fuca Strait there, and that left the Olympic Peninsula completely isolated. It's the largest unexplored tract of land in the lower 48 states. You have 101 that goes around the circumference, but there are no roads that transverse it. You can't get into the park. Teddy Roosevelt used his Antiquities Act in 1909 to be able to station rangers there. The problem was the largest species of elk in North America resided here, and they were being hunted to extinction. They were endangered. There weren't a lot of them left. So he wanted them protected. FDR upgraded to national park status a few years later. The park is roughly the size of Cape Cod. It's about 100 square miles. So you can drive around, and there are the squiggly red lines there give you roads a little bit entering into the park. You can go into from the north to Hurricane Ridge. Drive around. Port Angeles is the largest town in the area. To the west of Port Angeles is the Elwha River. Mount Olympus in the middle, not particularly huge. It's about 8,000 feet. If you're used to Colorado and 14,000 footers, you'll scoff at it, but it's enough of an impediment that as the jet stream comes from off the ocean, it bangs into the Olympic mountain range and dumps. So the west side is very wet. You can get into the whole rainforest there with a road partway in. And then there's the Pacific Rim section. Longest undeveloped stretch of wilderness beach anywhere in the lower 48. You got 70 miles with no Malibu condos or billboards or roads or anything, just pristine wilderness. I get asked quite a bit, what's your favorite national park? The way I interpret that is if I had one park to go back to and spend a week at, which one would you go? It would be Olympic. I just drastically underestimated what was there. When I visited, I didn't allot enough time. What we'll go through is you're looking at 3 parks in one, basically. If you come from the east, if you drive around Puget Sound and come up the east coast, you drive into Hurricane Ridge, you could be in the Swiss Alps. It's high alpine meadows. You've got glacier covered peaks in the distance. That's my wife looking at the chart, telling us what mountains we're looking at. Wildlife is what they're called. There are no armaments, no guns allowed in a national park, firearms. So after a few generations, the deer aren't so afraid of catching one in between the eyes. They're more interested in what you're having for lunch. They'll come over and take that sandwich right out of you. They're not real wild, very friendly, but they make for good pictures for some in the foreground of your mountain shots. You drive around from Hurricane Ridge and you've got these 250-foot Douglas firs bordering the roads. Crescent Lake was gouged out, beautiful, clear water. Marimere is there's a lot of trails that you don't really have to overnight to. This is 1.5 miles round trip and it's flat. Where you have melting snow and you have mountains, you're going to have waterfalls all over the place, 90 foot. That's a big leaf maple. That's where the tree gets its name. That's the size of the leaf from a big leaf maple tree. And that's a banana slug. You're not going to miss them. They're bright yellow. So as you're walking through the wood, they're almost as long as a ruler. They're 10 inches long. It's like a snail without a shell. They're rather striking. They don't have teeth or anything, but kind of awkward to hold if you choose to do so. So Sol Duc, there's a road that comes in from 101 into a resort area called Sol Duc. There's a hot springs there. This is the falls, come down a narrow chasm. You can stay, a lot of people in Seattle will use this as a little 3-day weekend getaway place. You can stay at the resort if you want. They have cabins if you can bring the family and have a place to yourself. The attraction is the hot springs. There's half a dozen different pools. That's my wife in the middle of the foreground pool there. It's like playing through the Three Bears. Each of the pool, they're not mechanically heated. They're just bubbling up out of the ground, but each of the pools is a slightly different temperature. So you can pool hop until you find just the one that's just right for you. Fun. And the falls, any trail you go on, you're gonna find waterfalls that you can get great pictures of. I think this is the one that Olympic beer used on the label of their Tumwater image. So now if you go around to the western side of the park, you can come in. Now this is where the water dumps. You could be over in the Philippines. This is a legitimate rainforest. They actually have more biomass per acre than anywhere else and ever in the world. The monstrous trees, the big western hemlocks, the red cedars, the Sitka spruces are big enough on their own, but everything is completely covered and draped in mosses and lichen and stuff. So the total moss covers everything. It was named a biosphere. It's ongoing superlative natural phenomena, lots of protections in place so that it never gets developed. The trail there that you take is called the Hall of Mosses. They do give you a warning sign that the elk, this isn't a petting zoo, this is their area, and you are the intruder. So if they happen to have staked out the trail for a while, you sit and you wait until they go by, because the bucks average almost 900 pounds. These aren't little guys. And that rack that you're looking at is over 4 foot spread. You don't know what side of the bed they got up that morning, and you don't want to find out that it was the wrong one by crossing them. You just passively wait until they move on. This was the one, they're called the Roosevelt elk because of Teddy that saved them from extinction. They're now up over 5,000 of them in the park. So they've done a good job protecting them and bringing them back from the edge of extinction. It's like a hike back in time, back to the Jurassic period. The very difficult to see the size of anything. If you look on the branch on just above the path, that's my wife actually, to give you some scale of the size of the tree that we're looking at, and the lichen drapery. This is Jurassic material. Surprising they don't try to film more stuff here. The champion trees, if you remember from our East Coast parks, there are 3 measurements that you take for any tree. You go up 48 inches from the ground and measure the circumference of the tree. You measure the ground to the top, the height of the tree, and then the width of the crown spread. And you add those 3 numbers together, you get a numerical value for any particular tree. The tallest one of that species is the champion tree. There's a list of, these are national champions that are in Olympic National Park. All of those different species, your national, these are crazy. The red cedar, 760-inch circumference to a tree. That's what it looks like. It's 61 feet around the tree. You just don't have specimens like that in New England. So very noteworthy. Now, this was an interesting project, fairly new, 2012 to 2014. There are 5 different species of salmon that used to spawn in the rivers of Olympic National Park. That was before they put the dams up that impeded progress up the rivers. Well, they decided to, this is the largest dam removal project anywhere in the world, which they had to get pretty creative. You can't just blow the dam and let the reservoir wash everything out downstream from it. They had to do it piecemeal. So they created a floating platform with the destructive implement of destruction there. And it would chip away and make a V in the cement that would basically cause a new spillway for the waters to come through. And as the water is lowered, the floating platform would drop with it. So they ended up opening it up, that where those bulldozers are, used to be the electric plant. It's now, they've recovered over 70 miles of new spawning grounds are now reopened to the salmon. So this is a big one for the conservationists. If you bring 20 somethings or 30 somethings that were into the Twilight series, they may not be all that hepped up to see the national park. They will definitely want to stop at Forks and visit. This is where the Twilight series was filmed. To get from the main section of park over to the Pacific Rim section, you have to go through the town of Forks. And if you're not familiar with it, it doesn't mean anything to you, but the kids will be more excited about that than seeing this pristine beaches. Ruby Beach, southern end of the Pacific Rim, you can drive to. There's a resort there and stuff. You can hike out to the Kalaloch tree. This baby's hanging on for dear life. It's a big tree too. Beautiful viewing areas there. You can sit, and there's a lot of marine life, mammals, sea lions, otters, seals. You don't even need a boat to go whale watching. The gray whales come pretty close to shore to feed, and you can see the porpoises and whales right from shore. So in 1958, Holly Dyer, there weren't a lot of female conservationists in the 50s. She was a unique individual. The construction was threatened of a very commercial highway to open up access to the Pacific Rim section. She got William O. Douglas to lead a 23-mile hike along the beach. She arranged the media so that it got a lot of publicity, and it was very successful. It stopped the planning and the construction of the site. So now to get out there, you have to hike, but this is what you have there instead of beach overlooking beach restaurants and stuff. You've got wild places. So to get to the Pacific Rim section, closest you can get is the ranger station. You leave your car there, and there's a 3-mile boardwalk. You go out through you'll see deer in the afternoon there feeding, through the forest over to the beach. And this is very wild. Sea stacks. This is what I mean. It takes a full day to appreciate the alpine meadows over at Hurricane Ridge and hike around the ridges there. Then you get lost in the rainforest. I didn't even hike up into the Olympic Mountains. That's where the elk go in the summer and stuff. Lots of hiking trails up there. Pacific Rim, within one park, you've got Alps, rainforest, and tide pools, sea anemones, and it's just a quite varied park. Low tide, the starfish don't move very much. They kind of hang out there. The tide goes away, and then it'll come back and cover them up. You have sea cabbages and stuff. Brooks actually owns a CrossFit facility, so I don't know if he dragged that driftwood up or whether it was there. Shishi Beach, another one. Thank you, Polly. She lobbied for this to be added to the northern stretch. She extended the beach by about 3 miles, the Pacific Rim section of the park by an additional 3 miles by adding Shishi. It's the northern tip of the peninsula. You come along, you've got to pass through the Indian reservation to get access to the trailhead. That the dotted line there hikes down. It's a 3-mile trail. To get down to Shishi Beach, you have to pay a $10 permit to cross the Indian reservation. But you get down there, and you want to pay attention to the tide charts, because when the tide's out, have at it. You can hike anywhere you want, but it's going to come back in. I've not been there. These are pictures from Andy Porter, lives up in the area. This, again, the starfish are going to be covered when the water comes back in. You don't even have to move very much. You can sit in one area and the water recedes and the picture changes, the sun shifts, the shadows change. You get sunset pictures. It's a pretty special place. Very high wow factor sunsets. This is Point Oliva, bookending I have a picture from the top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia, where the first rays of sun hit the lower 48. This is the westernmost, the counterpart, the last westernmost point to see the sun, down a little south. Now you can also camp out there. So because it's wild and there's no towns, you have no man-made light to block anything out. So nighttime is very cool. It's a dark sky park. That's one of the three parks rimming Seattle. North Cascades, if you go north, this one they do call the American Alps. It's one of the least visited parks. It's not real accessible. This one is a hiking park. To get into it, there's one road, which is a national scenic highway that bisects the northern and the southern sections of the park. And then you've got two NRAs, it's National Recreation Area. You've got Ross Lake NRA above and Lake Chelan buttressing the borders of the park to expand the conserved area. So you've got one road through the middle of it. That's the scenery to drive the scenic highway. Other than that one road, in the entire park, there are 6 miles of road, not an inch of pavement. So there's 400 miles of hiking trails, but you don't drive. There's our girl. There's Polly Dyer. She was convincing Henry in the middle, I think was the editor of the Sierra Club. She's making her case for the designation, the creation of North Cascades National Park. She was just boundless energy. 300 glaciers in the park. Remember Glacier National Park. Oh, we haven't covered that. That's next one. Spoiler alert, Glacier has 25 glaciers. North Cascades is only a couple hundred miles to the west. They have 300. That being said, over the last few years, from 84 to 2007, they've shrunk. They've lost over 40% of their volume. So they're not getting enough snow in the winter to offset what melts in the summer. So they're receding. But there's enough there that the goats like it. The mountain goats are abound. This is very, very wild areas. Some spectacular peaks. Mount Baker, you can actually ski on. Mount Baker. There's Shuckson is way up in the northwest corner. It's quite a hike to get to it, but look at the scenery you have for your picnic lunch. It's just gorgeous area. There's Doffy sitting on the Pacific Crest, comes down from the Canadian border. Here, there's 3 different lakes, Ross, Diablo, and Gorge Lake. Each one of them has a dam. Those 3 dams supply over 25% of the electrical needs, the power to Seattle. They're big. They're not as big as the Hoover, but the road goes right over the tops of them. And the reservoir that it backs up are gorgeous. It's not food coloring there. This is suspended glacial till that gives it the coloration, because it's all cascading down from meltwaters in the mountains. A lot of bridges getting over the cascades, over the rivers, but basically that's your trails. Pretty much anywhere you go. They're not necessarily a lot of elevation gain. They follow the ridges, so there are some trails that are very hikeable. I had come down from summit climb on Rainier, and I had rented some plastic double boots that I hadn't gotten used to. I had some blisters, I couldn't hike. So normally on this 7-week van trip, we would eat out of the cooler in the morning, have some fruit and yogurt and stuff, and then have a trail hike during the day. But each night we would stop at a local pub or diner and sample indigenous foods from the area and talk with people. So this woman, when we told her we were from Boston, she said, "Oh, you got to go up to Boston Peak." She told us this logging road that was accessible. We had a van. We opened the back doors of the van. We used to put vice grips on the hinges and keep the doors straight out. I'm sitting on the double futon there, back of it, looking straight out. That's the view out the back of our van that we drove up to. That's Boston Peak over on the right. You've got glaciers and melting snow waters and waterfalls and beautiful meadows and stuff. We were there for 2 hours, never saw another. You hear a lot about overcrowding in the parks. Doesn't pertain to North Cascades. We never saw another person for 2 hours. And then we didn't even hike here. We just drove up to it. So it's a gorgeous park to explore. Not a lot of people do. The Cascade Range was named after, oddly enough, Cascades. Waterfalls all over the place. Very different dichotomy between the western side of the park and the eastern side. The West Pacific jet stream coming across the Pacific hits the mountains and dumps over 110 inches of rain a year. So you have big plants, the cedars and hemlocks and Douglas firs. Over the other side, on the eastern side, they only get 35 inches of rain. So it's more akin to the highlands of the Colorado plateau, or the mid Colorado. You get ponderosa pines and sagebrush, and very different look to the place. That's your hiking trails up along the ridge lines. Makes for a heck of a backdrop. And you can get your obligatory sunset pictures. It takes good clouds to get a good sunset picture, and the clouds bunch up before they go up and over the mountains. So pretty much every afternoon you get a keeper of a sunset shot. And that brings us to our last of the 6 parks tonight, or today, Mount Rainier. Rainier is only 80 miles from Seattle. Seattle's a port city. It's on water, it's at sea level. This is not photoshopped. So Seattle is sitting at sea level. 80 miles inland, you have a 14,000-foot volcano looming up over the city. It's the third, they call it the most topographically prominent mountain. That means from base to summit, Denali is the tallest anywhere in the world. Mauna Kea over on the Big Island starts at sea level and goes up a little higher, but this is the third largest in the US. It's 13,000 feet towering above the base of the mountain. Essentially, like all the Cascade volcanoes, you've got the Pacific plate banging into the North American plate. It subsides below it. That makes for some cracks. The magma finds its way up and you end up with a volcano. That's what causes Mount Baker and Shuxon and Mount Rainier. John Muir climbed to the summit in a trip up there in 1888. He was so smitten with the place, he spent the next 11 years lobbying for it to be made into a national park and conserved. He was very successful. It was our 5th national park. The red line is the Wonderland Trail. It was created way back in 1915, circumnavigates the whole, it's 93 miles around Rainier. Remember, there's 25 glaciers in all of Glacier National Park. There's 25 glaciers on Mount Rainier, the most of any mountain in the lower 48. we've had a winter here on the Cape. You get 6 or 7 inches. It's a pain. You got to go shovel and stuff. How about they average over 600 inches of snow a year? Except for 71. I don't know what happened then, but they had double that. 1,100 inches of snow in one winter. The mountain is so beautiful from virtually any, you can take the Wonderland Trail and any way you're looking at it, it's magnificent. Up on top, you get snow. From the 3,000 foot elevation down below, all that precipitation falls as rain. So you've got an old growth forest there that the lumber companies would love to get at, and it was saved from them. 142 square miles of old growth forest, the Grove of the Patriarchs. This is fun. These suspension bridges are fun if you're the only one on it, but if somebody else comes out there, it kind of sets up a wave action. It's a little tricky. And again, the boardwalks to keep you from condensing the wood. They don't cut up if one of the giants falls, they don't cut it up and remove it. They'll leave it there so that you can see just how darn big these things are. Very similar to the whole rainforest. You're in an old growth forest. Another one of the magnificent lodges, Paradise Inn, also built in 1915, right at, it's 5,000 feet elevation. So from Seattle, you got to go winding roads, switchbacks up to, you got to climb 5,000 feet in elevation, but the top of the mountain's 14,400. So you're still well below. Big old place. You know, when you have 200 foot, 300 foot trees to deal with, you can make posts and beams like that. A nice little quiet breakfast nook. There are a lot of memorable images in Rainier. The wild flowers are up there on the top of the list as the must-sees. You would think this is between 5,000 and 7,000 foot elevation. So you can drive to Paradise and the trailheads from there go off into these alpine meadows. You would think the Johnny Appleseed of Lupin came through the area. John Muir was the guy that got around. He explored up into Glacier Bay National Park area in Alaska. He fought the world of the Sierra Nevadas. He got around in the mountains. His quote is engraved in the granite steps at the trailhead of the alpine meadows there. The most luxuriant and extravagantly beautiful of all the alpine gardens I ever beheld in my mountaintop wanderings. And he was a guy that did a lot of wandering. They're just spectacular. Mid to late July into August, everything blooms, because prior to that, the snow hasn't gone. You're at elevation, so the snow doesn't disappear early. And then September it starts snowing again. So it's a short season, but when you're there, the wildflower pictures, and it depends on what section. This is west of the mountain, Spray Park. You get different species show up. And it's not like you found the one little patch of avalanche lilies when there's fields of them all over the place. It's just, if you're a garden club member, that's the time you want to go see this place. Wildflowers are to die for. Waterfalls, there's over 100 in the park. For perspective, obviously it doesn't have the volume of Niagara, but Niagara Falls is 167 feet tall. This is over 300, and you can drive right to the top of it. Most of these are very accessible from the roads. They're not hidden away, and after a day's hike to get to them, there's the observation bridge right at the top of Narada. Or you have to get off of the bridge that you're driving around and come around to see what the bridge is going over to get the view of the waterfalls. Waterfalls also accumulate into all the potholes that were dug out as, again, the glaciers receded to the north. They left scooped out areas that filled in. This is not in the Cascade Range, just within the borders of the park. There are 325 lakes. So if somebody's camping at the one that you found, go a mile down the road and down the trail, and you'll find another one that you can have to yourself. No shortage of reflection views. Oma, a mountain that was gone. This is down in the southern section of the park, the Tatoosh Range that virtually nobody goes to. Very wild, but your reward is views like that. Now, some people go there actually to climb the mountain. Paradise, as you can see, the switchback road, you can drive up to Paradise Visitor Center. The inn is at 5,000 feet elevation. You start there and you go up the Nisqually or the Cowlitz or Ingraham glaciers on your way up to the top. These are kind of a mixture of pictures. I've climbed a few times. The first one was on the 4th of July, which was interesting because at a going away party when we were leaving San Francisco, a friend of ours said, "Oh, talk to Jim Whitaker." He worked for New Balance, the friend, and Rainier Mountaineering used the guides there to test mountaineering boots and stuff. He said, there's a weekend up and down you can do. You do a summit climb on Rainier. So, oh, all right, that's fine. So I called up. They said, when are you coming? I said, 4th of July. They said, okay, you're all set. So it didn't seem like a big deal. Ignorance is bliss. This is generally acclaimed to be the most difficult climb in the lower 48 states. I grew up in New England. Mount Washington at 6,200 is all as high as you can get. This is 14,000 foot mountain. I really didn't appreciate what I was doing. What happened was, this is on the up and down. The first afternoon you hike from Paradise at 5,000 feet. You go up to Camp Muir. It's not much of a camp. It's a plywood shack that's held down with guy wires so it doesn't blow away. But you spend the night there, and then you go the next morning, get up real early and go to the summit. I was roped in to give you an idea of the quality of mountaineering people up there. Phil Urschler, I just bought this book. He and his wife, Susan, became, this is a library presentation, became the first couple to climb all 7 of the tallest mountain on each of the 7 summits. I was roped in with him for 2 days after he had just returned. The only reason I got on to this hike, what I found out was that there's a 2-year wait list to get onto this up and down climb. He came back from attaining the summit. He was the first American to climb the north face of Everest. He had just gotten back and he volunteered to lead an extra holiday weekend climb. Within 2 minutes of him saying that, the phone rang and it was me, and I happened to be there on the 4th of July. So she didn't go to the wait list. She just said, okay, you're fine. And she put my name in. So it was serendipitous that I got to be on there. It's usually a big deal. But in climbing with him, I didn't have any problem getting up there. So on the way down, he said, where'd you get your climbing experience? I said, I grew up in New England. This is the first time I've ever been over 10,000 feet in my life. He said, well, you should come back in the winter. If you come back there, which this is in January, you can do a winter seminar where Rainier Mountaineering, if they teach you your crevasse rescue techniques and avalanche, how to read the snow and stuff, the mountaineering skills that you should have to go up higher, you're then accredited to join them. They'll go climb the Matterhorn or Kilimanjaro or anybody down in the Andes, the volcanoes. This guy, Eric, so I went back in the winter time. Eric was my guide there. This is his Ghosts of Everest book. he was the one that found Mallory's body on Mount Everest. So these are the quality of guides that you find out there in the area. So you're learning from some pretty top-notch guys. This is our we were going off in the winter seminar to learn crevasse rescue, which we had not yet been taught. That's why you go to learn. That, by the way, in the middle, you can see you're looking into the blown out northwest cone of Mount St. Helens there. So the scenery is pretty cool all day. Well, if you're walking across a crevassed glacier, you're always roped in together. You have your hand on an ice axe. If you hear the word falling, it means somebody broke through a snow bridge and is going down into a crevasse. If you fall into a crevasse, you're supposed to yell falling. Anybody on a rope team that hears the word falling immediately is to drop down and dig your ice axe in, because you're going to get a tug on your harness. Somebody's falling and you got to stop them, or else you get pulled into the crevasse. So we've got 3 rope teams with Eric and his 2 assistants walking across. He gets to the edge of a crevasse and he looks back at us. I happen to be right behind him on the rope. And he goes, falling, and jumps off the ledge into the crevasse, which we weren't expecting. And I barely stopped in time to not go over the edge. The poor guy was like 45 feet dangling down into the crevasse by the time our team stopped his sliding. But now we can't do anything. We're pinned down, keeping him from going further. The 2 other assistant guides unclip from their ropes. They go, oh, altitude sickness, a headache, I got to go sit down. They left us. they wanted to see how we would do without their guidance in getting them out. Well, you can't just pull the rope up to get them out, because the rope bites into the edge of the snow and you end up pulling them against the side of the crevasse. You learn later that you put an ice axe across and put the rope over it, and then it doesn't bite in. But we hadn't been taught that yet. So he was very patient. It took us quite a while to get him up and out, but when we were all, you don't unhook just because you're now closer. We're all still roped in. And after he critiqued our efforts, he said, okay, who's next? Well, what the hell? He did it. So I figured I couldn't get yelled at. I let out a yell of falling and jumped over the edge into the crevasse. So here's my right foot. I had plenty of time. Everybody stopped me, and now I'm dangling down. This is in the crevasse looking down. I got my camera out of my pack, and that's my right foot looking down. That's looking back up at the edge that I jumped over into. And it's an interesting experience. But you do learn enough that you can go up to the top. So what happens is, when this is on a summer hike, it doesn't matter, when the sun comes up, throughout the day, it softens the top 6-8 inches of the glacier. And basically you're walking in mashed potatoes. Well, if you have crampons on, that's not good, because it balls up and you're essentially walking on banana peels. So you want to climb with crampons before it warms up. So you get up at 3 in the morning with headlamps, and you're going up before it's lit up. And that's sunrise. Actually, we've been hiking for 3 hours already when the sun rose. This is called disappointment cleaver, because from below you're looking, oh, we're almost there. You're looking at the summit. You're not even close. It's way down below us is the top of Disappointment Cleaver. You go over the top of that, and then you see the rest of the mountain. I gave my camera to the guy ahead of me on the rope team, so that's me in the red and black going up the final. You're not far from Seattle-Tacoma Airport, so we're looking down at the jetliners that are coming in to land at SeaTac Airport are way down below us. It's, you're at 14,000 feet elevation. But look at the day. I don't know where this rumor comes from that Seattle is rainy and dismal and stuff. I've been there 3 times and literally get snow blinded with the reflection off this. You're above tree line. There's no shade, and it just reflects off the sun so badly. I have massive headaches from this brilliant sunshine. I don't know, maybe it rains there sometimes, but you can't prove it by me. One very, very interesting feature at the top is that if you can find the entrance to the cave, there are thermal hot air vents still coming up from the volcano that melt into these ice caves. They've saved many a climber from, they got whiteout storms that socked them in and they couldn't get back down. If you know how to find the cave, it's a nice haven. This is not Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is an actual lenticular clouds form when there's going to be a dramatic change in the weather. Either it's going to go from clear to stormy, or I think the other way around as well. But it looks fake. It's a real cloud. Sunset, again, depends on where you are as to, there's just no shortage of awesome views, either with the lake reflection or just the alpenglow. It's the western face. So that's our tour of the Northwest. I hope you liked getting a look at what's out there for you.